Hello and welcome to this edition of Yakima Agenda. I'm Randy Buehler. Here in the YPAC studio, we are very happy to have Mayor of the City of Yakima, Patricia Byers, and the Deputy Mayor of the City of Yakima, Matt Brown. We do this every 3 months or so.
Every quarter. Mm-hmm.
And so it's been a little while. Last year was the last time we sat down and had a chance to talk with you. At that point, we were talking about the city budget, and that was because you guys had just gotten done adopting the budget for 2025. Moving into this year, one of the things that was talked about at the end of last year was going out and getting some feedback from the community about what lies ahead. And what lies ahead, according to projections, is some challenging times potentially for a part of the budget that we call the general fund. Can you just briefly describe what the projections are at this point in 2026? What is the city looking at for that general fund? What sort of shortfall?
We're looking at a potential $9 million deficit starting through 2026. And that is in the general fund. It's not in the other funds that the city uses. The general fund is the fund for the operations of our full service city. Different departments like public works, utilities, police, fire, not necessarily fire, I don't think, but those that generate income have another bucket of money for their capital development, and so that money can be allocated for that. But the operations of their department come from the general fund.
So in summary, the general fund, those services that are paid for, those are services that are generally paid for by taxes and fees.
Yes.
Yeah.
As opposed to your garbage or water or wastewater.
Right.
Those you pay a service just like if you would to a private entity.
Correct.
But the general fund pays for services that don't generate revenue, and they fall into 4 basic buckets: police, fire, park, streets. Mm-hmm. There's also administrative stuff, IT, human resources, legal, that kind of stuff. But that shortfall, so the overall city budget is roughly $270 million. Out of that, about 75 is the general fund. Those are the services, again, that are paid for with taxes and fees. That's what we're focused on, right?
Correct.
Not the water, wastewater, sewer, or
no,
water,
they
wastewater,
generate
stormwater.
money that comes into their budget for capital development, those kinds of things. Perfect example, last night at City Council meeting on the budget, and we pulled it off the consent so that people could really understand what was going on. There was a resolution to, over a 5-year period, pay $1 million for equipment, for laser and other equipment, taser and other equipment coming into the police department to use, and explain to us why it went over a 5-year period and how they were going to do that. That came out of their capital fund. That is not a part of the general fund, the operation of the city. That's specifically for them in the capital development. Different bucket of money. So it's not part of the general fund. A lot of people had questions about that. So that's why, one of the reasons we pulled it off the agenda, so we could explain to people how that was different.
I want to come back to the different buckets of money in a second, but this $9 million shortfall, how do you easily explain that to somebody who asks you, what do you mean it's a $9 million shortfall? How do you explain that? Well, we have this much in taxes, this much in revenue or income, paycheck for lack of a better term, and this is what it costs to provide those services.
I mean, I think the easiest way to explain that is over the last 4 years, we've seen inflation go from 2 to 3% a year to now over the last 4 years of being in the 20% that has increased.
Right.
Everyone at home has felt those costs. You have a lot of families now working multiple jobs just to try to provide the same level of service at home. Yeah. Whereas the city, we can't just formulate new jobs that brings in more money. We have very fixed kind of revenue that comes in through sales taxes, property taxes are the 2 major pieces there. And so when you start talking about that, we don't have the ability to escalate with inflation. Under state law and even locally, there's just not a way, if county and city governments went up 22% over the last 4 years, a lot of people would have been feeling it a lot harder even. So I think there's, some of those decisions are affecting local governments harder than, let's say, even the federal government. or state government, although the state government's experiencing the same issue. They're projecting a budget deficit of billions of dollars.
Right.
Luckily, we're not in that frame. We'd be in a world of hurt. You see it all over the state. Cities are having this same perplexing issue is how do we provide just the same amount of basic services that we've been trying to provide when all of our costs have increased? Now, we also have things that, are out of our control to some degree. Labor contracts come in, different things like that happen, increase, the city's costs far beyond what our revenue is. And so when we're looking at it, I'm like, man, how do we kind of balance that ship? I've had lots of discussions, I'm sure Mayor has, with folks who are like, well, can't you just cut more? Can't you just, and I'm like, yeah, we can.
Did. In the previous year's budget, we cut 10% across the board. And some of that was with vacant positions not filled. So we have when you talk about the departments and ask them how their staffing is, we have a lean, tight machine right now, staffing across all departments, because we did make some of those cuts, on the last biennial budget. So we can't do any more of that. To continue functioning as a city is a little what we do. We're a full service city. It takes a lot of staff, a lot of administration to do that.
Well, it comes back to as well is like we can definitely cut more, but now we're talking about service level cuts, right? And so what that means is, okay, we're going to eliminate these positions. Well, that's an entire department.
Right.
That's those type of conversations that we're having with the community right now. This is what it's not real rose colored here. This is what the realities are for our community.
This is factual.
And what type of government do you want? What type of services do you want us to fund? That's kind of where we're at, trying to figure it out.
And what we're telling people about the survey is that it's just that. We haven't made any decisions. We want to know what the people in the community we serve, what they want, what are their priorities, what they're willing to pay for, what they're not willing to pay for. And that's what the survey is designed to do. So we're pretty factual in the survey in terms of, we're starting with a $9 million deficit. And here's our options. We can do this or we can do that. And what do you want us to do? So
you mentioned the survey.
Yeah.
That's one mechanism by which the city is going out and asking for feedback from the community. That survey, it's relatively short. It doesn't ask a lot of tough questions, but basically there's one part of it that's an exercise where you can choose to eliminate these different programs, and it shows the amount that it costs annually or roughly to provide that. It shows the number of people it takes to provide that.
Right.
And your goal is to try and reduce those programs to get that full $9 million shortfall filled. But it also asks kind of the opposite question. Here's one path, which is reducing these programs. And there are some pretty major things like closing a fire station, closing pools, closing a Harmon Center. The flip side of that is, are you willing to pay more in specifically property taxes if you knew that that public safety services, police, fire, and courts generally were fully funded? That's a big part of what the survey is trying to find out as well.
Yeah, and I think right now we've had a lot of people that have started to submit the survey. I'm not entirely sure how many, but I think as we gather that data, that's one aspect that we're taking. We've also, I think on the last episode we talked about our budget advisory committee.
Yes.
They're in full swing right now as well, going through the city budget and prioritizing based on what they see fit. There's a lot of work trying to get community feedback on this before we make this decision. This is a big decision that's going to have to be made, probably in May, that we're going to have to make it. We'll have to figure out, okay, where are we at?
Well, because in May we'll start the budgeting process for 26, which is the second half of this biennium budget. So,
can you talk a little bit more about this budget advisory committee? What's the makeup of the committee, and what's that committee tasked with?
Well, the makeup, each council person was asked to submit a name that they wanted to come onto the committee to do some work based on who you knew, what their skills were. So, but these are ordinary Yakima citizens who have a variety of backgrounds, a variety of talents, a variety of work that they've done. So I think we have a great mix, in terms of just taking average citizens and saying, take a deep dive here, take a look. This is what we have budgeted out. What changes can we possibly make? to help them. About a year and a half ago, the council had a retreat, and we decided to move toward priority-based budgeting for two reasons. Number one, because it was more helpful to the council, gave us clear information, but it also empowers us in doing the budgeting to decide what the priorities are by that and where we think the money should go. And we have gotten a lot of positive feedback. I think other people, it helps them understand also what we're doing in the budgeting process, to know that we have these priorities, and it may or may not align with their priorities, so they can give us feedback on that. But everything that you see on the list in terms of the survey, almost all of those were in the priorities for the city of Yakima.
Well, and if you look at what the committee's kind of tasked to do now is much like all the rest of the community, which they're kind of giving their feedback on their priorities. This committee is looking through it, and they've seen what department heads and council has kind of prioritized some of these things already.
Right.
But now we want their feedback. Okay, so what do you guys think about this program or this aspect? Is it a number one or is it a number five? Like where does that fall in your world? And whenever that report, I believe that's coming to us at the end of April. I'm not entirely sure, but whenever that comes, that's going to give us another aspect of data points that we can look at and go, okay, so this is what they think. This is what the community survey thinks. Now we need to make decisions.
Right. In our categories of priorities for the city and budgeting, each category has several different things in it. And so that committee will be looking at those several different things. Within that whole area, priority area, what are the things that are most important?
Back to the survey for just a second. It is available on the city website. You can also access it from city social media platforms. But one thing that's coming up here pretty soon is there's going to be an opportunity for people out in the general community. We will send out some outreach folks, and maybe to a grocery store or a community event. Pop-ups, and they'll be able to be helped through the survey by our outreach personnel, and that seems like another opportunity that people may have.
We're also going to do town halls. We're going to do some combined district town halls. So I think 5 and 6 are doing a town hall together. 3, 4, and 5 are doing a town hall together. 6 and 7, and then 3, 4, and 5 are doing one, and then 1 and 2 are doing one in the areas in which they're located. So people will come and spend maybe half an hour, it won't be a whole long, half hour, 45 minutes, to hear the presentation, understand what we're trying to gather from them, get their feedback, answer questions, and then have them fill out the survey right there on iPads. So I've had a lot of seniors reach out to me and go, I can't do QR codes. I tried it on my phone and it doesn't show everything. So let me give you a little trick on the phone. If your phone doesn't show everything, turn your phone sideways and you see the whole survey. But the other thing is that they'll be able to go right to the city's website. City of Yakima, Google that, first page up, the budget or the budget survey is on there. So,
and in addition, the city manager, Vicki Baker, is also going out and making not just at the town halls, but presentations to other organizations, groups, et cetera.
So there'll be lots and we are going to put out a schedule of the town halls and of the pop-ups as soon as we get that arranged, so people know exactly where they can go.
I also think it's really important for the community to understand that this is probably the most transparent process in regards to the budget that's probably been taken by a council in a long time. I mean, seeking your feedback on this budget, it's your tax money. What do you want us funding with it?
Right.
I mean, I think that's a complete opposite of how things have been for a very long time. It's council makes a decision, the public has to react. Oh, they reacted wrong, or it's loud. Okay, we got to change the budget now to kind of fix that. This is the opposite. We're asking you. We want your feedback. We're not going to make decisions just in a vacuum here. We're going to make them so that we can, have the right data at our fingertips to ultimately try to balance that budget for 26.
Right.
So speaking of feedback, and we only have just a few minutes left, but speaking of feedback, that survey has been out for a couple weeks now.
Right.
Have you gotten any preliminary feedback from people that you represent, folks in the community, about what their reaction is to the survey?
I've gotten 2 different kinds of feedback, mostly just through people who stopped me, like I'm at Kistel Park, they'll stop me and ask about it, or emails into the city. Most of the feedback, whether they actually like the survey or not, has been pretty positive. Just the fact that the council is doing this, I think, is open and transparent, and it's helpful for people to understand that. From the seniors mostly, not necessarily from the seniors, but people in general, if they have favorite parts of their city services, they're very afraid right off the top. You can't cut this service. And we're not saying we're going to cut the service. I try to walk them through that. We aren't making any decisions. We want you as our constituents, as the taxpayers of the city, we want you to give us feedback on what you think are the most important things, what things can be promoted and what things may have to be cut. So
I think that's a very important point.
yes.
Yeah.
That the survey is gathering information. It's not decision making at this point.
Right, and I think that was a couple of my constituents were a little concerned at first because they're like, this is why we brought you here, so you can make this decision. I'm going, I know, but I need your input on the decision we're going to make.
Right.
And then the other aspect, I think, for my district, the biggest pushback I've seen has been from our Harmon Center friends. I've met with them already. We've done. I actually almost did like a mini town hall already with the Harmon Center folks. I hear them. They're in my district. I'm there once a month anyways. And so I'm like, I will fight for whatever that is. I've told them that. Now, I'm only one council member. And we do have some hard decisions to make when it comes to these things because everyone's going to have
different favorites.
Yeah, and it's going to be a hard decision for council. Do we tax more to increase revenue? Do we balance it with almost like a cocktail of things? So we do cuts and, this piece, so it's not felt as hard. It's going to be an interesting exercise as we go through this in May and June.
But the more people that respond, the greater opportunity we as a council will have to kind of discern in those decisions really what will be the best path forward.
So I imagine that you are looking to the what's coming up next with maybe some hope that the feedback that you get will help you in really guiding the council in making some of these difficult decisions that lie ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I am hopeful. I think at the same time I'm also a realist in understanding that these decisions that have to be made are going to be a difficult process. However, I think it's very important for our community to understand that these decisions have to be made so that we don't continue on the trajectory that we're at. It gets worse in 27 and 28 if we don't make some of these changes now.
We have to make changes.
Yeah, that is a really good place, I think, to end our conversation today. Encouraging people to fill out the survey and encouraging them to provide that input because there are some tough decisions ahead to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you to Mayor Patricia Byers and Deputy Mayor Matt Brown for joining us here at the YPAC studio. And thank you as well for joining us for this edition of Yakima Agenda. I'm Randy Buehler. Take care.